Welcome to Spirited Straight Talk, the podcast to help you thrive with the help of spirit. I'm Deb Shepard, psychic medium, spiritual teacher, and author. Each week, I bring new insights to help you heal from loss, connect with spirit, and turn setbacks into triumphs. So let's get started. I remember watching a TV show in the morning, like a morning show from New York, and they were talking about the most updated cell phone at the time. And they were wondering about the camera that's now on the phone. Well, now, we use our cameras that are better than cameras, right? And they were concerned. The topic came up of where's our privacy? And are we going to cross all these boundaries when they're filming people and we're being filmed and we don't know about it? And I remember that being like, wow, what do we do with that? And who's going to video me? And what if this happens? And what we've learned through this process is in social media, there really are no boundaries that are respected anymore. And there's two sides to it. One is things are being captured on film to help with evidence or to show what's happening in the world. But the other part of it is there's no privacy. And this comes up to the topic that we're going to talk about today, and that's boundaries and the importance of them and how hard it is to create our own boundaries or understand them based on how we were raised or our culture, our belief systems, all those things that come into play, that boundaries are now very exploited. And the other part of it is, are we setting good boundaries for ourselves and for our situations in our life to create the happiness and feeling safe in our life? Mm-hmm. Is that making sense to you too? And who's with me today is Dana, as always. For those of you that may be new to our podcast, this is Dana, my partner, and she coordinates everything. So this wouldn't be happening if it wasn't her sitting here. And I have good boundaries with this. I don't touch any of the computer technology because I will mess it up. I think when I started realizing this topic of boundaries, it's such encompassing, it's such a large thing to really discuss. Part of it, I believe, is thinking about our childhood and what we were taught by the adults in our lives. So I want to talk a little bit about that, but then go back into how do we then set boundaries in our personal life that we really, truly need? And if we don't, what can happen in our lives?
And spiritual boundaries too. I know you're going to talk about this, I'm sure, because you talk about it a lot, is how you actually set boundaries with the spiritual world. And I think that was a big deal for you too.
Mm-hmm. So to talk about the boundaries, when people find out that I'm a psychic and a medium, you can see their faces change and going, can you read my mind? Do you know what's going on? I'm like, no, I'm really clear. And I didn't, like you said in the beginning, it was just all over the place. And that wasn't good for me. I'm an empath. And if you're an empath, you don't want to feel everybody else's things. And some people say, oh, put that white light around you. To me, the white light is saying that you're a victim and you're not in your power and you don't have clear boundaries and you don't have the ability to tell people to step away or whatever you need at that moment. But for me, I've learned over the years is I turn it on and off. And I don't want to be in a situation where it's always on and I'm getting things that is not appropriate. Because if someone is coming to me in a business situation, then I have permission to read for them. But if they're just someone I'm socializing with or out in a crowd with, I have no right, in my opinion, in my ethics, to just give them a reading. But we do have a recent story, and you even said that when we were in Monterey.
I want to go there, but I also want you to talk about, because I know this story, so I'm going to bring it up, how you set boundaries with the spirit, the other side.
Correct.
Where you basically said, I need to turn this off. It's driving me crazy.
Mm-hmm.
I always have people coming through and I need to figure out a way to manage it.
Absolutely. So I've been doing this work for a little over 2 decades, and there wasn't any information. There was no Google. I went to the library and read books and realized these abilities. But I had a friend that was a psychic, and I think she was in her late 70s at the time. I'm sure she's not with us anymore. Laverne was her name. And I remember just getting downloaded and downloaded and downloaded where I couldn't sleep and just difficulty functioning. And so I reached out to her and I said, Laverne, what do I do with this? And she says, well, what time is your appointment? And I said, well, I think it's 5:00. And she goes, well, tell them to leave you alone until 5:00. And I thought, really? It's that simple? And I did. And then that's when I heard the grasshoppers and I thought, maybe crickets. That's it. Thank you. Thank God you're here. I heard the crickets. I could see a little green bug in my head. They're black. Okay, whatever the color they are. So with that said, I can talk to dead people, but I don't know my insects, my bugs. But I did that and I heard the crickets and I thought, oh my goodness, I think I turned off these abilities. I have these people coming at 5:00. What do I do? And my first response to that inside my head was, well, then I just won't charge them. If I've done that, then I'll figure it out this later on. And when I sat down with the clients and shifted that energy, I immediately started feeling their loved ones come through. Mm-hmm. That's the moment I realized that I can have boundaries and I don't have to be bombarded by all that energy. And it's also, my guides have also established boundaries with me. People think that if you do this work, you know all the answers. But bottom line is, you can only tell people what you're getting. And so our big joke about this is when people are pregnant, they want to know the sex of the child. I'm 99% wrong. And I think it's the boundaries that they set is just because I ask or want to know, or someone wants to know that information, maybe it's not for me to give. And that's when I don't get anything about something, a situation or question. I hear the grasshoppers, whichever one's showing up. And I think there's a misconception about this work is realizing that there's certain things that we don't get for certain reasons. And so it's just not, you don't look at a ball and get all the answers. There is a process to it. And that also goes into our personal lives about having those boundaries. One of the things I was thinking about is, I actually wrote down 10 reasons why we probably don't have good boundaries, but there's so much more than that. So we'll kind of go into other things as well. But when we are told by parents about sharing a room with your siblings, and you know how many kids will have issues with sharing their bedroom? Do you divide a line? Things like that. And you're told, well, this is your baby sister, so you need to be more patient. It's really, sometimes I think and I didn't have to do that, so I was pretty fortunate, but I know a lot of people had to share rooms, and that probably is a beginning stage of where those boundaries set. If the sibling didn't have boundaries, took your things, and that child did not have to be disciplined or have to make those changes, I think that's a big part of it. I think number 2, it's also, did you have to share all your toys? Now, these things seem really simple, like did you have to share your clothes and toys? But part of it is that we're ingrained very early on. If you have a special toy or clothing piece that you just loved, you're forced to share it because you don't want to be selfish. And all of a sudden you can't say no because your family, the adults in your life said, you have to share. You have to share. The other thing...
Well, sharing isn't bad.
No, it's not.
And I remember, because my son was an only child, so I remember he was most of the time on his own. He didn't have to share anything. Mm-hmm. His cousins came over and they would always say, he doesn't share very good. But there were 3 of them and 1 of him. And so I didn't really teach him that he had to give his toys to somebody else and watch them play with them.
And he actually has good boundaries, though.
He does.
So saying you don't have to do this. But I think there's pressure of thinking that you have to share because that's a good thing. Otherwise, you're a selfish person. Mm-hmm. And I think there's nothing wrong with sharing and teaching your child to share. But is there also a voice with this child saying, I don't want to share this, but I'll share these other toys or I'll share these other things. So, and again, these are things that we don't really think are serious. But as we add these other things to it, it starts making sense. Well, you're being selfish that you're not sharing versus why can't you share this and asking those questions? I think giving hugs to family members or friends that the kid thinks that person's creepy. We say, no, be nice to grandpa, give them a hug. And you're going, this kid's thinking, grandpa gives me the weird feelings. I don't want to. But that child is forced to do that, to be nice and take away their boundaries. So with our grandkids, when they are going to bed or whatever, and they don't want to give us a hug, we don't force it.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, because I am creepy and they know it. But I think that there is that belief system is, well, grandpa deserves this, but did grandpa earn it? Or does the kid not feel right? You're telling the child not to listen to their intuition. And that's what this is about too. You're told at a very early age, even though you feel that way, ignore it. And so that's some of the other things are you're told not to be honest and to say what you need to say. So it's like, you can't tell them the truth. You have to lie to somebody like, oh yeah, this is really great, versus you don't want to be there. Or you don't want to go with them. I remember my daughter, our next door neighbor, that was a little bit odd. And she wanted to take my daughter in a wagon around the block, and my daughter didn't want to go. And
just randomly?
Yeah, but she had a couple kids too.
Okay.
But at the same time, my daughter was just like, no, there's a certain ages that kids know.
Mm-hmm.
And I think she eventually went, but I was just like, no, you don't have to go do that. But we're told you have to make the adults happy, because if you make the adults happy, you'll get rewarded, even though you're going against your own intuition, your own feeling. You're told sometimes if you're in a situation that you're responsible for your siblings, other people are first. It's even where, as a child, you're taking care of a parent and you're told you have to do these things instead of realizing that, what about your needs at the same time? So if you're exhausted or tired, or you feel like, I don't want to do this anymore, you're told as a child, you have to do it no matter what. Again, this is that fine line about helping and supporting your family versus always being forced and ignoring your needs. I love the one that eat everything on your plate. Number 8. Okay, yeah, you're eating. I remember my parents were not even middle class, but the food on the table was, they worked hard to put it on the table. And as a kid, your textures and your taste and things are not as developed, and being told you have to eat it, or think about the children that are starving. You have to eat it.
Dumplings.
Yeah, that was the big one. Chicken and dumplings. It was the dumplings, that the texture of it. And I've heard these stories where kids have to sit there for hours. And so
finish their plate.
Yeah. And to me, I think that child would rather not eat and go to their room. And then we wonder why we're forced to eat things that we don't like, or forced to stuff down our voices, or to stuff down our emotions, because we're told to do it whether you like it or not. Absolutely.
So true.
Yeah. I've always loved the one, because if you're an empath and you were a sensitive child, I cried a lot and was told many times, you're just so sensitive. It was wrong to have those emotions. I still cry like, yeah, that's right. You get to see it. And you get to know when I call the insects something wrong, but they'll say, I'll give you something to cry about. So it would be more punishment if you had an emotion that made you feel sad. So let's say any of these things that came up, that you didn't want to hug the uncle or the grandpa or whoever it was, and you started crying, then you were getting in trouble on top of it because you were crying for having an emotion. So again, we're pushing all these things down and believing that the adults in our lives are correct and how we feel is wrong. And so we have no voice about boundaries with that. And again, there's a balance. The 10th one we have written here, and I think a lot of people I know in my generation know this saying about children should be seen and not heard. So not having a voice as a child show that your value and what you felt and what you needed to say was not important. And that's where we take all of that belief system that is limiting to a place today where we don't know how to have boundaries. And we still believe that we have to take care of everybody else. We have to be responsible for those that can't take care of themselves or won't take care of themselves. We feel an obligation. And that's when we create those codependency relationships too, where we let go of all of our emotions, feelings, and needs to take care of somebody else. And then we have the regret being to get angry and frustrated and low self-esteem. And our value just goes down into the toilet, basically. Right. And it really takes a lot, like we've talked about how you were raised. And what's important to know is
how I was
ignored. Yes. It's also not the definition of who you are today. So those experiences that you, the audience, as well as us, have had, doesn't have to be something you continue with in this time period in your life, that you can make those changes. We just had a recent story, and if you want to tell it, you can, but I teach this, and I still struggled with my value and having some boundaries in a situation when you wanted to help. And I'm like, oh no, I don't want to be difficult. I don't want to be a challenge. What will people think?
What you told me was,
Well, start in the beginning of the story.
Your voice said, I'm telling you not to call them. And my mind said, okay.
Do you want to start in the beginning of the story? Go ahead. I think you'll tell it better.
We stayed in an Airbnb. It's a big place, but we had a full apartment area with a full kitchen and a really nice little area. And there were some young kiddos upstairs, maybe tweens, that age. And they were maybe having a pogo stick up there or jumping.
I called it running of the bulls.
Doing a wee, something, the running of the bulls. Yeah. And it was really super loud in the area we were in. And day one, I said, we need to call the people we're renting the Airbnb. Let me call them real quick, or let me text them. And Deb Shepherd said, no, let's not rock the boat. Let's not make things worse. And we can deal with this. I don't want to be a complainer. It's going to stop, but I'm so mad, but it's probably going to stop.
Because I was looking for peace and quiet. And several days later, it continued and continued until near the end of our trip. I went up to the family and took some food that we had that was some of my favorite things, right?
Side stand that we got.
Yeah, peaches, sourdough bread, which I love, and thought that would help an opening. And I'm like, here, we're getting ready to leave. I want to, if you guys would like to have some of the stuff. And all four of the family members were in the garage, so I didn't even have to go to the front door. And I said, this is our last day. I really would appreciate if you guys could be quiet. And I said, it sounds like the running of the bulls. And the mom goes, oh, really? And the girls just stared at me like I was yeah. And then the dad just had his face on the phone looking down, and no one really commented or apologized or anything like that. I felt really good. Like, okay, I finally used my voice, because I don't like confrontations.
It's funny, you wouldn't let me handle it, but then you're the one who went up and used your voice.
Yeah. And probably if Dana would have said it, it would have turned out very differently, because I'm the person like, oh, let's just make this easier for everybody, and
you can say it. You're kinder than I am. I'm much more direct.
You're direct. Yeah. So, hey, I'm a bee. I put honey on everything. Right. So we go downstairs. I think, oh, Dana, I think this is going to work. They were all there. And well, guess what? It got louder and worse. We were in the hot tub, which has a cover, but these girls were leaning over. They're dragging furniture over the deck. See us dragging the patio furniture all over the deck, making more noise, stomping. It got worse. And I got emotional. You could reach out.
It was so bad. We were going to go to a hotel.
Yeah.
That's how bad it was.
Yeah. And beautiful place and beautiful people that own it and all that kind of stuff. And of course, they took care of it right away. Stopped. Dana did Dana. With that said, I told Dana, I said, I should have let you do this earlier. I should have had the boundaries. We are worthy of having quiet and all these things. And Dana goes, well, I bet this will be a teaching story later on. And I've been teaching it, because even though I understand boundaries, and we still have to be reminded that it's okay to have those boundaries. I remember when we went on a cruise before the pandemic, and it was people stuffing themselves into the 22 elevators, remember?
Oh, yeah, you couldn't breathe.
You couldn't breathe. And it was those kind of boundaries again, where people are just pushing themselves and not thinking can I wait for the next elevator to come down? So, or up, or whatever that's the situation is. But really, we see it all the time and not realize how much is in our life. But it is, I think, a lot to do with our culture, what we're taught as children, what we sometimes we don't feel like we have the right to or don't deserve this. And it's something that I think it affects so many different things in our lives. And I want to go to the other side of it where people have put boundaries with us. And that's been really hard, but I want to always respect when people put boundaries. I don't have to agree with why they put them. So if you're a person that has other people putting boundaries on you, it took probably a lot of energy for them to do that. It doesn't mean you have to agree. You can be sad. You can feel like, okay, how do I shift this? But I think it's learning how to have that voice. So for instance, in our trip, you were open to saying, we need to have this, and I wasn't willing. So at that moment, I should have gone back as, I do deserve this, and it's important. Or how angry am I? And I did get angry. How angry in the situation that you keep going to that someone doesn't have the boundaries? I've heard this with people in offices where someone will come in and take a lot of time and dump on them and not realize that that's a boundary because you're getting paid to work and this person is coming into your office feeling comfortable. How do you then begin to say things to say, I really have to get this project done, or saying, I have 5 or 10 minutes, that's all I have. And I think it's wording it so that you're not offending somebody, but you're letting them know how you feel. Yeah. Because when we look at boundaries, people will continue to take advantage of you if you can't say no. And that's the hardest thing. In the beginning of doing this work, I would have people want to go out and go, oh, can I take you to lunch or can I take you to coffee? And then, of course, they wanted to have a reading.
Oh, yeah. Can't you just do this for me? It's easy.
It's easy for you. Yeah. And my friends that are in my life now don't do that unless I say, I'm okay with you asking. Most of them will book appointments, or they understand the boundaries of my relationship with them. But in the beginning, I had to start saying to them, I'm not reading today, or this is my day off, or in like what you say is just make an appointment with her. But it was hard in the beginning because I wanted to help people. I wanted them to feel better. I wanted them to know that, yeah, I'm not taking advantage of them. I don't have to charge every single time, but yes, I can. I don't have to be of service every single time with anyone that just needs, a hit.
Shouldn't you give that away?
And people think, can't you do it for free? It's creating that balance. And if you're an individual in a marriage or relationship or in a job, and you feel like you're being abused, you're the one that has to have a voice to say, this is really affecting me. Can you help me find a solution? How can we change this?
Because it is really, truly impossible without the boundaries.
Mm-hmm. And I think I see relationships, whether it's your work, your kids, your partner, your family, whatever it is, if you don't create those boundaries, we just walk away upset was it fair to the person that crossed them that you didn't tell them what you needed? And I think a lot of us that are sensitive are good at having boundaries. And we also don't say no. And so people will continue to walk over you because you haven't set up. So don't assume they know what to do.
So what happens when you tell somebody that this really is kind of crossing a boundary for me? Like, I really don't want to do it this way, or whatever the case is. And their response is, well, I didn't know I was crossing your unforeseen boundary. What do you do in a case like that? Like, how do you handle that? You're so good at giving people advice. And I know our listeners are probably like, yeah, I try, but they don't listen.
Right. I think part of it is that type of person is never going to really get it, as we could say. But saying, well, I'm sorry that I wasn't more clear. So take that a responsibility, because they're just going to argue with you. And you may want to say, well, what's best for me right now is this. I hope you can honor and respect it, but this can change. And if you have, and let me know. Yeah, because they're going to defend themselves because of their behavior. Most people that cross boundaries and keep taking advantage know what they're doing. They're just trying to get what they can for free. And if you're that willing person all the time, that will continue. We were at a place the other day checking out hot tubs, remember? Just seeing what's out there and if we're interested and things like that. And he started telling us stories about how people would come in and take advantage and use their hot tubs, but weren't really interested in buying or researching anything like that, people will try to push the edge of the envelope if they can. If you keep attracting these people, that means you have not been clear on your boundaries. So you are the center of that. If you keep bringing people in that take advantage, so if everyone at work dumps on you, if your family and friends always expect you to show up and be the leader and take care of things, that means that everyone else is just saying, oh, he or she will do it, instead of saying, no, I can't. And you can also, I tell people some of the things is, oh, I would love to help you. I've got some things going on. So I'm going to put this in the calendar 2 weeks from now that we can get together and take care of it. By that time, that person has already had another resolution. They found someone else to help them out. So if you don't feel comfortable saying no, then let them know you will help them, but it's way down the road.
And I understand handling it with kid gloves like that, but I'm assuming people have problems setting boundaries if they have to go that direction with it.
Mm-hmm.
If it's easier, great, but how do you just get rid of that guilt?
I don't think it's going to be easy in the beginning because you're not practicing it. So if you've been for years giving and then getting upset, that guilt's going to show up because you've probably been raised to believe it's better to give than receive. It's taking care of others. You're very blessed. So the guilt will eventually subside because you're realizing your life is better. And that person or individuals or situations will continue until you stop it. It's like telling a child or someone, no, 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 and still letting them have what they wanted because they broke you down. And what's interesting for people that feel guilty saying no, the person that's asking doesn't feel bad that they keep asking. And that should tell you about that individual. But they will find another source. The guilt, I think, is part of just the healing. And when I know with you and I, when we've changed these boundaries in our lives, what has happened is what we feel relieved that we set them.
And sometimes those people leave your life because they can't get what they want from you.
Which means that they only wanted you for that reason. Yeah. And so sometimes we do keep relationships in our lives by doing everything we can to help them, what I call the prostitute, right? Because we don't want to be abandoned. And if people say no, they believe that they may be abandoning somebody else. And so they feel guilty for that.
If you have the contract of abandonment, that's a big one.
That's one. So if you don't like being abandoned and then you feel like you're abandoning them, remember, you're not the only powerful person in their life. It's what I explain in my classes is if your child's in school and they're doing someone else's homework all the time because that student doesn't want to do it and your child doesn't do theirs, there's no win-win. So every time you do someone else's work, you're not getting your things done and you're not getting your life in order. You're so distracted. I'm so busy with other people's things. And so the guilt comes from eventually saying, I don't want to live like this anymore. And it gives you the opportunity to attract people in your life that are more like-minded. They have boundaries as well. They don't want to dump on you. They want to take their portion. And that's what we have attracted is those kind of friendships that say, here I am for you because you're here for me. And there's that give and take in the relationship. And it's so much easier because I want to be with those people. I want to be in that energy.
And I think once you realize the relationships you want to attract, you weed out the ones that are not aligning with you quicker.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was going back to that guilt thing. I think you're correct on trying to create boundaries has a lot to do with guilt. And the guilt is a low vibration. So if you want to change your life and create abundance, great relationships, better health, you want to connect with your guides, that is going to be critical because otherwise you're overwhelmed with other people's energy, especially the empaths out there, versus being aligned and having that clear energy that you're supposed to have. But I think the big thing right now to wrap this up is look at what you were taught as a child, look at your experiences with the relationships. How many times have you said you're exhausted? Where are you on the list? Do you believe that you deserve the massage or the day off or the pedicure? Or do you feel like you give the reason, well, I've done all these things, so I now deserve that, versus you don't deserve it. You get to have it because you need it. You want it. Instead of saying, well, I did all these things. Now I get to take care of me. if you start teaching other people to take care of yourself first, that can change other people. And like we've talked about on the airplane, right? If hopefully the plane's not going down, but they tell you put your mask on first before you put on someone else's mask. And what we do is we take care of everybody else while we're struggling to survive. Does that make sense?
Well, I was just going to ask, so what do you think the top 3 things you should do when you're starting to set boundaries?
I think the first thing is to either journal or think about it, talk with a friend that you feel safe with about a certain situation that keeps coming up where boundaries are being crossed. But start with just maybe a couple of them that, you really feel like it's important to do this with. And think of the scenario. So when that person walks into the office that loves to stay there for 35 minutes, when they're all talking about themselves and you just really want to get to work, just when they come and go, it's great to see you. Hey, I've got 10 minutes. Start with even doing that. And when the 10 minutes go, oh, I have to let you go because I have to get this thing done. So you're giving yourself permission to limit the time that you're with them. What will happen eventually is that they know that in time, you don't have a lot of time for that. So they'll stop coming to your place, or they'll realize it will just be a quick hello. It won't be dumping. If it's a family member that keeps asking you for things, maybe perhaps in the beginning, if you don't feel safe saying no, say, yeah, I can help you on the 3rd week of this month. But until then, I've got some things to do before this. It's making those excuses in a sense that they're really true and positive. You're not lying, that you can be there, but this is the situation. I can give you time, but only this amount. And over time, it becomes easier. So for those people that don't just get it, you may have to be a little bit more stern and just saying, listen, this isn't working for me. This is how I'm feeling with this, to make those clear boundaries. And perhaps you may hurt people's feelings, but maybe they need to know that they're crossing people's boundaries and you're allowing them to. Would that make some sense? You're better at it than I am, though.
Boundaries?
Yeah.
Oh, I say no a lot more.
Yes, you're just like, no, I can't do this. And that's
thank you for
sharing,
asking, or thank you for offering. Or
that's the one we should talk about. When people give unsolicited advice, to me is a boundary. Big boundary. So, for instance, I give advice because people pay me, or it's that situation. But when people give me unsolicited advice, geez, you want to tick me off? Ugh. And what I've learned in situations, especially when there's crowds of people and someone comes up and tells me what I should be doing or what I need to do, instead of confronting them or telling them what I really think, I just say, thanks for sharing.
And you turn around.
I remember my mother-in-law, bless her heart, there were times that I would say, oh, thank you for sharing. And finally one day she goes, does that mean you don't want to hear it? I go, exactly. Because I think it was political or something. It's where you can say things in that last moment of thank you for sharing, but that advice doesn't really resonate with me, or I'm not in a place to hear advice. And
that comes in a lot of grief.
Yes.
People always they say terrible things around grief.
This is a good example. Yeah. Someone's child's passed. They go, oh, they're with God. Oh, your loved one's in a better place, or God must have needed them. Whatever it is, or you've been grieving, for 2 years. Don't you think it's time to move on? Those are the people that can really be hurtful in someone's healing process. When you are going to have that kind of situation, think of something that you can say back to that person. And it might mean you need to educate them. Just go, I appreciate your thoughts. However, that doesn't help me. That's actually more hurtful because people are terrible.
Like I would say with my strong boundaries. Do you think that's helpful?
Yeah. And that's what you said. The best thing you can do for creating boundaries is think about a situation before it happens and have your response in hand and begin practicing that. That is your go-to. So it makes it much more simplistic and you have a tool in your tool bag. And to continue learning these techniques, go to the website or Amazon and buy my book, Grieving to Believing. There are a lot of tips and advice to give you, especially if you have the loss of a loved one, to learn how to respond to others that don't understand your grief. Again, the book is called Grieving to Believing. I think it really is helpful for people to have something like this in their hands and be able to practice their boundaries. So thank you again for joining us. And as I always say, even though they're on the other side, they're always by our side. Thank you. Thank you for listening to today's episode. I hope it inspired you. If you enjoyed our conversation, make sure you subscribe so that you get notified of new episodes. And let's get connected. Visit debshepard.com for more insights, support, workshops, and a book a session with me. And finally, always remember, your loved ones in spirit are just a thought away. Even though they're on the other side, they're always by your side.